Welcome, everyone. I'm excited for this podcast because it's the first one we're doing regarding a new product launch. I'm honored to have Shure on the podcast. That's Shure, spelled Shure. The company has just announced a brand new sound isolating earphone, the second generation SE846, a follow up to the original model introduced nearly 10 years ago. Joining us today, we have two product managers from Shure, along with senior headphone editor from Acoustics, William Jennings. I'm your host, Brian Mitchell, founder of Acoustics. Now I'm pleased to welcome Sean Sullivan, Shure's Associate Director of Wired Products. He's been with Shure for over 17 years and has overseen the design and production of Shure's most innovative earphone technology. Welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm also pleased to welcome Steve Merrick, Shure's Senior Product Management Specialist, who's been with Shure for over a decade and worked on many projects, including the Aonic series earphones and the SRH440A studio headphones that I'm wearing right now. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Finally, we have Acoustic Senior Headphone Editor William Jennings. He's been testing out the Shure SE846 Gen 2 earphones for the last week, and we'll get to his thoughts shortly. Welcome, William.
Thank you, Brian.
To get us started, I'd like to start out as simple as possible. This is a very unique product. There's a lot we're going to talk about, but Steve, can you start us out with a brief introduction? What's new with the SE846 Gen 2?
Sure. So the SE846 Gen 2 builds upon a lot of the technology and the core design of the first generation SE846, which has been in the market since 2013. And a lot of that stuff is still, industry leading technology. So there's not a lot of huge changes, but there were a few things after the product has been out in the market for almost a decade that we wanted to update, just to put a little extra, the arm, a little extra personal touch on it. So
Okay.
one of the main differences are we added an additional sound signature. So traditionally the SE846 is shipped with a balanced, a warm, and a bright sound signature. We added one called Extended, and that was based on, when we work trade shows, when we visit forums, when we talk to folks like you, we always, we're always listening to what people think.
Right.
And there were a few things that we picked up as trends a long time. One of which is that people wanted a little bit more extra high frequency above like 10 kilohertz
Okay.
to kind of open up the sound and make it a little more airy. So that was kind of our basic goal with the extended sound signature. Was to open that up, and it's a little bit. Whereas traditionally the warm and the bright sound signatures, you could think of them more kind of as a shelving filter. It's kind of a broad strokes approach to just getting an overall brighter or warmer sound, whereas the extended is a little bit more surgical or a little bit more tailored to just opening up those extra high frequencies and not adding anything in the area, the kind of upper mid kind of presence peak. Which has a lot of important, sound information in it, but we didn't want to emphasize that too much.
Okay. I think what I'm understanding real quickly, sorry to interrupt, is that this sounds like 4 headphones in one, maybe more. If you have 4 different sound signatures to choose from, is that an accurate way of describing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have one right here. Maybe you can see it on the screen here. Got to get my sleeve off. William beat me to it. He's got the new Jade version. So underneath the sleeve here, you can see that the nozzle, I don't know if you can see that very well.
Yep,
it comes with a little tool. And so you can take off the nozzle, and there's 4 different filters that you can put on to get the 4 different sound signatures. So, like Sean was saying before we started the podcast and we were chatting, everyone has different ears, but the human ear isn't changing, but everyone has a different preference. So the idea with the different sound signatures is to be able to say, hey, everyone's hearing is different. You can personalize it without having to do any type of active EQ or adding anything else in your signal chain. We're just looking at the pure raw acoustics and getting it to match people's preferences.
Okay, and just trying to keep things simple. These are earphones. Like you can plug them into an iPhone, right? You don't. Do you need special equipment, or you can plug them into laptop, iPhone, all things like that, right? So they can be for anybody.
Yeah, I think they're equally aimed at both professionals and audiophiles. So, for the professional, you're more likely to plug it into something like a wireless body pack if you're using it for on-stage monitoring,
Mm.
or if you're even like I use them in my home recording studio. It's great for vocalists if you have like a click track, or if they like to listen loud. You don't get any bleed going into a sensitive microphone. You're completely isolated. So it's great both in studio applications, but it's mostly used for onstage monitoring in the professional world. Audiophiles love the SE846 and Shure earphones in general. And so the SE846 is pretty easy to drive. And so you can plug it into, if you have any, phone with a 3.5 millimeter connector, you can plug it straight into your phone. If you have a good headphone amplifier, that's where they're really going to shine, but they certainly don't need that to drive them.
Okay, so I think you said, or I saw this in the press release, that you're targeting these towards audiophiles as well as musicians. Is that part of the new sound signature that should appeal to the audiophile market, or is that something that's always been in there?
Yeah, I'll jump on that a little bit.
Hi, Sean.
Hey
Welcome.
guys,
Yeah.
thanks, Frank. Interestingly enough, the audiophile and the pro market are essentially looking for the same thing for different reasons, right? So they both want the technology that's going to give them the most capability to reproduce sound as good as possible, for lack of a more scientific
Right.
term. But they might use it in different aspects. So where the audiophile is looking for something that's going to give them this perfectly crystal clear window to see through, that's got this great contour to it, for listening to these ever fine details throughout their music, so that they can enjoy them and experience them. The pros are using, and they want that same lens to be able to see every little detail, so that they can then go shape it the way they want it to. Steve brought up a great point the other day that an analogy that, whereas an engineer might be listening to an SE846 or a KSC 1500 or something to get that very fine detail, so that they can hear that breath in the microphone and remove it. Whereas an audiophile might be looking at that recording and hearing it and hearing that breath and going, wow, I can hear that breath. So it's one of them is using it as a tool, and the other one is using it as a way to really absorb every detail that's there.
Right. You just brought up another headphone, KSE 1500. I don't want to sidetrack us, but what's that real quickly in case anyone's wondering?
Yeah, so the KSC 1500 and the SE846 are our two top end earphone systems. The SE846 is a passive device. Like you said, it's got a 3.5 millimeter cable on it. You can use it to plug into anything with a headphone jack. No extra amplification or anything needed. It is the top of the line for passive earphones. Pardon me. The KSE 1500 is a different technology altogether, and that is using an electrostatic earphone, an electrostatic driver for the earphone, which is it's a completely different monster than the SE846, and you would use it for different, if you might love the 846 and prefer it over the KSE 1500, or vice versa, depending on your personal taste or what you're looking to get. The KSE 1500 is what I would consider the fine tooth comb of listening. You will get every single detail. There's nothing more capable. It's a single driver, man, I could talk for 3 days about the technology in the KSE 1500, but on the other side of it, it does require an amplifier to drive it, a particular high voltage amplifier that drives electrostatic speakers. So one of them more used.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to cut you off real quickly, but I want to get into the price, and I don't want people to get scared off by the price. I think the SE846 Gen 2 keeps the same price as it previously was at $899 US. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the KSC 1500
The
costs,
KSC
but
1500 is up over $2,000 for the system,
okay.
approaching $3,000. But yeah, the SE846 is out for $900,
Hmm.
$899.
Right.
But yes, that is the same price that the original was available for in recent years, and a little bit more in there for the same price. So that's
Right.
nice to be able to do.
And there's also something pretty cool. There's a wireless option you can add on for $100 to make them completely wireless. How does
That's
that
right.
work?
So the 846 or all of our SE earphones at this
Mm.
point are our Ionic earphones are detachable. So if you have a cable attached to them, you've got an MMCX connector on there. You can pop the cable off to either replace the cable and extend your
Right.
investment if something should go wrong, or you can use it to attach different accessories, exactly like William is showing there. The TW2 is what you're referring to, and that is our true
Mm.
wireless adapter. So this is, you can see where the MMCX connector is right in here,
Right.
and that attaches to where William was showing, and that snaps onto an earphone and just goes right around the ear. So you've got your secure fit adapter that holds it in place, the earphones in your ear, your control buttons back here, microphones in place.
So it kind of wraps around your ear for people that aren't seeing this on the video, just to give people an idea.
Yeah.
And then it kind
And
of
we
holds
were
it in place.
and we reviewed that one about a year ago now, Brian. So there is a complete discussion of it already on acoustics. I would point out too that they do a better job of fitment on that, where it stays in place, so that not only is it usable for a lot of people who just want to do casual listening, it's actually usable on stage, which is a big improvement for a lot of people. And a lot of these TWS systems simply don't stay in place nearly as well as you'd like while you're moving around. So
Yeah, one of the
on that.
Thank you, William. One of the keys that when we were designing that was to come up with a way that it was not going to come off unless you wanted it to come off. So it's a balance between having that comfort, the portability, the low profile, and the secure fit. The biggest complaint about true wireless systems for so long was that they fall out and you lose one.
Mm.
Now you're stuck and you got to go buy another pair. These do not. That is not the problem here.
Right. So they can be used wired, with a regular headphone connection, completely wireless, kind of like your Apple AirPods, just an extremely high-end audiophile solution.
Mm-hmm.
And William's been trying them out for the last week. So I'm very curious what you have to say.
Well, full disclosure, I've owned an original Model 846 for most of the time they've been out. I think I bought mine in 2014. I'm a little bit like Sean and Steve in that I have some musical background. Most of what I play is badly, but I do some playing for church and things like that, and I've always had a set of 846s batting around. And I think even when I went to CI or the custom in-ears at times, a lot of us keep the 846 around in a gig bag sort of thing because they're just so handy to have. And if you have somebody else needs one, you can hand them out, where you can't do that with customs and things like that. So I've been real familiar with the original model. Got these a little over a week ago now on the rehash, and I've spent a lot of time listening with the new red filter, the enhanced, because the other three kind of feel like old home week. It's very much still the 846 in that regard. I do think the new signature adds a good bit to the sound in that it picks up a little more percussion snap in that. So the percussion sounds a little more authoritative at times with some of the high end add. I do applaud the fact that, to their point, they didn't turn it into a big V. There wasn't an attempt to add a whole lot of bottom end to it. Not chasing the market in that respect. The presence region, like I said, vocals cut through real nicely, but they're not in your face. You don't feel like they're jumping out at you. Overall, it's very well done, very well tuned. I like it, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest in that in the market. I think that begs the question: is the filter going to be available for people who have first gens?
Who can take that?
I can go there. They are compatible completely compatible. At this point, we don't have any plans to just sell the filter by itself, but they will be compatible, backwards compatible. We may need to, haven't decided exactly how we're going to go about that yet.
So it sounds like
Well-
they're exactly the same size and shape as is that correct?
That's exactly, Yep.
I would argue that the Gen 2 is worth picking up for that filter alone at the current price. So I would not encourage people to wait and see what decision they make here. I've been really impressed, and not only that, but the new colorway is fantastic. I love the jade. The anodizing on it, beautifully done, nice and subtle, typical of Shure. And it's always cool to see the clear inside where you can pick out all the technical parts and start looking at balanced armatures. It's amazing how much you guys crammed into how little space. It really is.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, or a good point that you mentioned that. So the 846 obviously has been out for quite a while, and we've had a clear version, and then we've had several color versions that were solid colors on both front and back, or inside and outside, however you want to consider it. The colored versions, you could not see any of the technology inside, and for that reason, the clear version was far more popular than the colored versions. Well, the people liked the colors, and like you said, the finishes were very nice. But I think the magic of being able to see inside that window and seeing all that technology that's in there, and the consistency and the craftsmanship of all those so many parts in there, is there's something special there. A lot of these earphones that you see on the market that have, they'll have a ton of drivers in them. If you cracked open those cases and looked inside, it's a lot of drivers and a lot of wires that are kind of smushed in there with some glue, and it doesn't give you that craftsmanship feeling. And we don't do things like that. We know that, particularly in that miniature acoustic space, that consistency and exact placement and some tiny tolerances that we're working with, they're very important, because a slight degree off here or there will make an audible difference. And we boast consistency and craftsmanship in it. So being able to see inside the earphone there was very important to us. So these new versions, having the color outside and leaving the clear inside, I'm very happy with the way that turned out.
No, nice. William, back to you again. What else caught your attention from reviewing them or checking them out?
It's hard to differentiate the new one from the old one in some respects, and that's a good thing. Like I said, it's one of those where I think they did an awful lot right the first go around. And really, the thing that I have to say is, like I said, when you switch to the bright or the balanced or the earlier filter, the warm earlier filters, it does return you to a sense of, okay, this is the same thing I'm used to. I'm back to the same territory. So people who have always had an 846 who are looking for another pair or a spare or things like that, it really is going to be one of those where this adds another option, but it doesn't take away anything. And I think that's important to point out too, because there have been so many of these where Gen 2 fixed 2 or 3 things from Gen 1, but they broke 2 or 3 things too in the process. So I think it's critical to point out that, in listening to these in the week I've had, I have yet to find anything they broke. It's a really good in-ear. I like what they've done with the new filter. I do think that it's going to find a home, particularly in the audiophile market, where that top end extension gives you a little better imagery, a little more depth of soundstage, things like that. I can see some of your stage performers preferring that too, because I think it makes vocals a little more forward in some respects. And I think potentially for singers, particularly, they may like that tuning because it gives them more vocal feedback immediately. So yeah, I think those are the big things that stand out to me, is in looking for, anytime you have a Gen 2 of a product, you have to look at, say, okay, what'd they change? What's better? What's worse? In this case, what's worse is going to be really hard to find for people, I think, because I've had no luck in digging it out.
Right. Well, let's talk about those filters for a second. This isn't like a thing you change with an app. This is like a physical change to the product. Who could speak on the filters briefly?
Go for it, Steve.
Sure. Yeah. So the The acoustic network in the 846 is pretty fascinating, actually. So there's that's not the only filter that's involved in the design. So I guess to back up before any of the sound reaches those interchangeable filters, one of the most unique things about the 846 is the low pass filter, which is a labyrinth, which is a series of plates that have a pathway that's actually about 4.5 inches long, and it's tuned specifically to the sound from the low frequency drivers. There's a pair of them, goes through that tube, and there's no electrical component to that. It's an entirely mechanical acoustic crossover or filter. So the way that that's tuned means that only it starts rolling off around like 80 or 90 hertz, and so all that's getting out of that pathway is just your sub frequencies, and previously that was unattainable within an earphone. And so that then joins with the mid and the high frequency drivers, which are specifically tailored with crossovers and acoustic resistances to get them to blend seamlessly before they all join. And at the point that they join, that's where it reaches the interchangeable filters that you can select your preferred sound. So that's where, again, that's just an acoustic resistance. It's really precise. It's made with an electroform damper that basically just shapes the contour and the energy in the high frequency range. So you're getting the same core sound, and you're just deciding how it's shaped. So the 4 filters, like I said, there's a little nozzle tool, and you just interchange that. It's like, moving a microphone on a source or something. You're actually getting it without doing any adulteration, whether it's within an app or any type of electric tuning. It's all in the acoustic realm. And William pointed out a lot of the exact things that we were shooting for with that new filter, with the details and the extra vocal presence. But it's a lot of times we're talking about 1 or 2 dB difference, which in our world we know that makes a world of difference. It might seem subtle to someone who's not an audiophile or a professional,
Right.
but that can make all the difference. And so he hit the nail on the head there with what we were trying to get out of that. And the idea there is that you don't have to mess with it outside of it. It's just whatever you're plugging it into, it's good to go, and that's going to translate no matter how you're using it.
Yeah.
So
Brian,
go ahead.
we'll have some photos that I'll get you of the filters and the tool. I don't want to try and do it on screen because they're tiny parts, and it's not something you want to do, carelessly. So I'll make sure you have photos of those, but it's a very easy process to trade out the various filters, but it does require a little caution just simply because of the size.
Does it take a couple minutes or a minute to
tops.
do? Okay.
Yeah,
maybe a minute per in-ear.
When you get really good at it, you can knock it out pretty quick.
Sean's probably better at it than I am by a good margin.
But we have found in general that an end user or a customer that is when they get the SE846, they will swap out a filter a couple of times, and when they find the one that is suitable or they're preferred to their hearing, typically that's the one that stays in there, for 90% of the rest of the life of the product. It's not something that you would be popping back and forth, for a different tune, or it's a way for you to customize this piece of art to your particular liking. You get that extra 5-10% of customization that we allow you to shift that, so that once you've locked it in and picked your favorite, it pretty much stays that way. Which
one comes as the default already, or does it come pre-installed, or do you have to put it together?
The new red enhanced is or extended, I should say, is what's
so the new one
came in the box.
William's saying is phenomenal, comes as the default. You may not ever need to change it. You could probably keep it and be super happy, but if you really want to mess around with it, you can hear all the variations and then decide later.
There's a story there too. I don't know if you want. There's an anecdote from back in the day, the original development of the SE846. When we were originally designing this, we had developed it with what is the bright filter, and that was it. And there was one filter, and when we were doing all of our listening evaluation, that bright filter was really, it was exceptional for, 75% of the tracks that you're listening to. It was just beautiful. And then there were some tracks and some recordings that were mastered and mixed with some more of that high presence peak or that high mid area that could become a little bright, a little harsh, right? So we worked for months to try to just tame that just enough, like Steve was saying, 2 dB here or a little bit here, that would be just enough to take that edge off. So the result of that work was what is now the warm filter. So now at this point, I had this machine, this tool that sounded great with the bright filter for 80% of the music, but that 20% was too bright. And if I put the warm filter in, that 20% that was too bright now sounded great, but the other 80% sounded a little veiled. And we were struggling to find this beautiful harmony in the middle. And about 6 weeks before we launched the product, one of the engineers came by my desk and said, well, I've been messing with this other thing here. I want to try this one. And I popped it in and listened, and it was the eureka moment. In my 17 years at Shure, I'll never forget that moment that I popped it in and listened to it and went, yes, that's it. I ran around the whole building, like pounding on windows, like, hey, we did it, cruising around, and people are looking, they can't hear a word I'm saying, but they're looking through the glass like, all right, looks like Sean lost his mind again. But that is what became the balanced filter, and that is the one that then we shipped with the product, and we made the decision right there that we were going to include all three. So the balanced filter was the one that shipped in the product, and then the bright and the warm were there for you to customize as you wish. I believe
So
that
wait, is the balanced one from the original model, or is
the balanced one is from the original? So the original came with those three: warm,
okay,
balanced,
and balanced was the default that everyone
Correct.
would be used to if they didn't change it. Got you.
Exactly. And now with this extended one, this is beautiful. The nuances of differences, that extension that this red one gives you, I feel like it takes that balanced one and just opens it up with nothing offensive, just giving you more air and more, I don't know, it doesn't get bright like the bright one does. It just gets more open. It's extended is the proper term that we fought. We went a while trying to figure out what to call it, and extended was the right decision for sure. But man, it sounds great. I think people are really going to love that new available signature.
Was that can you take us back to when you decided to produce the second generation? Was that always the goal, to figure out the next filter, or how did the whole project begin?
Yeah, that's great. We're always working and thinking about how we can make something new or improve something that we've already got. And
Right.
we knew about 3 or 4 years in, we started seeing some folks that were tinkering in the audiophile community in particular, and they would take different materials and put them in these nozzle inserts and see what the result was. Folks on HeadFi and things that were there, they just discussed these back and forth, these little details, and it seemed like there was one solution that somebody had come up with that kind of did what we were looking for, or at least they were able to explain what it did. Didn't hear it, didn't see it, but and over the years, it seemed kind of like people were trying to achieve the exact same thing in different ways. And we've been messing around with it for years. When we came up with the solution for what is now the extended nozzle, we knew we had an opportunity, right, to add that to the mix. We also felt like we wanted to update the design a little bit, right, with those half clear shells and take a bit more modern colors to the market. But first, obviously, doing no harm, as William has spoken before. We didn't want to change anything. We just wanted to augment it. And it's been around for almost 10 years now. So, I mean, the last time we went out and really shouted from the mountaintops all the technology and the greatness of the 846 was many, many years ago. There's a lot more audiophiles out there that weren't around 10 years ago that didn't have the pleasure of hearing this story. So within 10 years there, the perfect timing to do it, adding but not changing, augmenting, and really just trying to restoke the excitement that was there for that first launch.
Nice. And like in-ear headphones, in-ear monitors, different ways. are those different ways of calling the same thing? You call them sound isolating earphones. Should that be scary for anybody, or should we just think of them as like wired earbuds? Like how would you? I don't want to undersell them as wired earbuds. I know that sounds like something you buy for $5 at the convenience store, but
That's been a battle for since I can remember. 17 years that we've been battling with what does the industry call what. We've always used the term earphone, regardless of what it is. You know, a headphone over the head, over the ears, right? Or with the band around the head. An in-ear earphone is what we consider these sound isolating. They go in the canal, right? They block out all the noise around. Our isolation is very high, so it puts you in a world. Even if you're in a loud environment, it blocks out all the sound. The noise versus your sound level is massive. Earbuds, I typically refer to as, you know, like the original AirPods, you know, where they kind of sit in your concha bowl, but they don't really block out the sound. They're just they're speakers that sit in your concha bowl. So we go with in-ear earphones and sound isolation versus something like active noise cancellation, right? That try to do the same thing, but passive isolation has been great for us. With the miniature technology, we've been able to really utilize that sound isolating technology, whereas you wear it like an earphone and it blocks out as much. I'm sorry, like an earplug, right? And it blocks out as much of the noise around you as an earplug would, but there's a port in it that just lets that sound through. So that's one of the major benefits of what I would call an in-ear earphone or sound isolating earphone versus your typical earbud.
And there's different size tips that come with them to make them comfortable and fill your ear canal. And should people be concerned about comfort? I know people don't always like to put things relatively deep in their ear, but William, can you talk about the comfort factor?
Oh, I think Shure's done a great job. If you look at their kit, it ships with more different styles and sizes of tips than just about anybody else in the market. So I think most people are going to be able to find something that's comfortable within that framework. If nothing else, there are two different types of complies, another set of foams provided by Shure, and then a fourth style, all of the foam isolating tips. And then there are 3 different styles of silicone tips that'll isolate a little less, but maybe more comfortable to some people. So I think you're going to find somewhere in that mix, there's both a fit and an isolation level that's likely to be what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I'll add that that's always a huge priority for us is comfort, because if you're not going to be comfortable and if you're not going to get a good acoustic seal, then you're not going to enjoy the earphones. So we always err on the side of providing more foams, more sleeves than you could possibly need. But we know that everybody's ears are different. So compared to the previous revision of the SE846, we have 1 extra set of sleeves that comes with the second generation. So that's an extra small, which was as small as we could humanly make a sleeve for people that have smaller ears. So that brings, I believe we shipped 22 total sleeves. I'll have to confirm that number, but last time I was looking at what we put in the box, it was 22 sleeves. So there's the extra small, medium, and large foam sleeves, and that's where you get the best isolation. So if someone is performing on stage and they want to block out sound, or if you're traveling on an airplane or a train and you want to block out that rumble, the foam is ideal. The silicone are very easy if you need to quickly remove the earphones and put them in often. It's very, very quick and easy to get the earphones in and out. And then we have just every different shape and size. We have one set called the P series from Comply, which are a little bit longer. So we're just looking to make sure that no matter what kind of ear, what the shape is, that you're always going to get a good seal and a good fit, and make sure that it's comfortable.
William, would you say they're easy to take in and out, travel with? Any issues there?
Oh, none at all. And I would point out too that one of the things that the 846 does extremely well is it is smaller than a lot of its competitors. So people that have small ears are probably going to have less issue with the 846 than they do with a lot of the competitors' models that are similar. It is really an amazing piece of technology when you look at how much is crammed into how small a case. And I know I said that earlier, but the whole thing is a little smaller than a dime.
Yeah. I mean, so what's in there? 4 drivers, I think. Like, what makes these things work?
Yeah, you've got two low frequency drivers, and those low frequency drivers are balanced armatures. One mid frequency balanced armature, one high frequency balanced armature, one low pass filter that consists of 10 stainless steel plates that are laser welded together with that path etched through them, like Steve was mentioning before. You've got a collector that holds some of the additional, or a manifold as we call it, that houses some of the additional fixed resistance acoustic shaping. You've got the nozzle, the micro injection molded metal steel coupling, that where the stainless steel nozzle will lock a key in and then screw down. Got a circuit board in there with different levels of electrical components on there to shape the signal prior to ever even reaching the drivers. The different levels of filtering and coloring are throughout the 3 different realms, as I would call them. The electrical realm we've got where we're shaping the signal before it gets to the drivers. Then you've got the mechanical realm, right, where the electrical signal is being converted into mechanical and driving the paddles within the drivers.
Right.
And then the acoustic realm, where the sound has been created by the drivers and now is being shaped through all of these different filters that we have along the way. And then finally, that acoustic filter that's within the nozzle insert, of which you get 4, and those are the ones that you can change that high mid presence to your liking. But there's a ton of stuff in there, man. It was unbelievable. And the technology that was required to create those parts with the tiny tolerances that we had to get wasn't even available. It didn't exist until, I don't know, 6 months or something before we needed it. Like we went looking for this thing, and the tooling companies that we were talking to about this machinery that we needed and the tolerances that we needed were like, wow, yeah, that's funny that you should ask, because this thing didn't exist with those tolerances until just recently. So you're in luck. Somebody else had the same timing that we really needed.
Is this for the Gen 2 model or for both?
This is for
SE?
both. This is for
Okay,
both. Yeah. Yeah.
So very difficult to produce, to
Yes.
make.
Yes.
But I would like to learn about each of your roles and maybe the team behind it. Like, what do you each touch upon in your role, and when do you see the product or have a point in shaping it? Sounds like, Sean, you do a lot of the acoustic engineering part. Is that?
Now, I should say, when 10 years ago, when the 846 was originally designed, I was basically doing what Steve is doing now.
Okay.
So since then, I have a team, and Steve is part of that team. They have taken over those daily on the development team that is designing these new things, and where I've moved beyond that to some more front end planning and strategy and some of that. So I think I'll leave it up to Steve to kind of explain how our particular roles throughout the years have worked with these teams that come up with the technology.
Yeah. As within the product management team, we think of ourselves as being the voice of the customer. So we're here to talk with folks like you and go to trade shows and go out in the field and use the product ourselves, because a lot of us are musicians and audio engineers, and so we need to make sure that the products are meeting the needs of the market. So from the inception of something, of an earphone, for example, we'll define what it needs to sound like, what the requirements are for how it needs to fit, how much it can cost, and what customers that's going to serve. And so then we work really closely with our acoustics engineering team, which is really the best part of our jobs, to be able to evaluate early prototypes and have them, somebody come together with, hey, I have this different combination of drivers, take a listen to this, and then our eyes light up, and then we're able to say, hey, we can actually turn this into a product. And so then we'll put it through the paces, whether it's going through beta testers, or, you know, I guess we're the first line of defense. We're, like I was saying earlier, well, I'll use it in the studio. We'll use it in live performance. Sean is gigging all the time. I'm recording all the time. There's a bunch of other musicians in Shure, so we can say, hey, you know, use these for a couple of weeks. Let us know your feedback before we send it out to anyone, you know, outside of the company. And so it's kind of an iterative process. We'll get feedback. Somebody will say, hey, it's a little too bright, or hey, we'll get, you know, the 846 having interchangeable nozzles, for example. Some people might say, hey, this is too bright. I'm a bass player, a drummer. I want to hear a ton of bass on stage. And then for an audiophile who wants to hear those extra details, they might say, hey, this is a little bit too dark or a little too warm. And so that's when we end up with something like the nozzles. That's where those ideas are born, essentially. And so once we think that we have a product that's good to go, then we bring it to the market. So we're kind of, you know, we're talking to, it's funny, a lot of times if we're working with people in marketing, they see us as being more the engineer type. And when we're dealing with engineers, they say, oh, you guys are marketing. So we kind of bridge that gap to make sure that that all the functions are working together to make what we need to make.
Yeah, it sounds like you're trying to get to that eureka moment that Sean got to earlier when he found the balanced signature. And it sounds like that's what really makes your job rewarding, to kind of find these needles in the haystack type of thing.
Absolutely.
And it also sounds like you're both musicians, like you use these products yourselves, so they have to be good enough for you and other musicians before you just send them out in the market and go, here, try this. Like a lot of internal testing, personal testing. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
Yeah,
level of, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just going to say we are probably the most rude critics internally, where we are just pretty brutal with our criticism, because we had, like I said, we're the first line of defense. So if we're going to send it out, you know, if we're going to send William a unit to review, it has to pass our test first. So sorry, Sean, what were you going to say before I cut you off?
Yeah, I was saying the other, you know, it can be your best from a development standpoint. It can be your best friend, and your worst enemy is the level of quality controls that we have in place. You know, Steve, that example or that explanation of what we do, that example of what we do in a quick 2 minutes there, like the development of the 846, I think was about 4.5 to 5 years long. So there's a lot that goes on in between ideation and development or launch. But part of that, particularly when you're looking at something like the 846 or the KC1500, where it's this new technology that we've invented that we're trying to manufacture with these tiny little tolerances, they also have to fit into these, you know, industrial designs and the mechanical engineering and the quality engineering that goes into them. It can't break, it can't fail, and it has to fit comfortably, it has to look good, and it has to, other than just having to sound good. The quality controls that we have at Shure are very strenuous and they're there for good reason. They have taken projects that could have taken 2 years and made them take 4 years. They have also taken products that could have only lasted a couple of years in the market and then extended their lives to 10 years. So it's your best friend and your worst enemy, like I said at the time. But the quality is a huge part of the story. SE846, for instance, right? It's still out for 10 years, or it's still going to keep going after 4 years of development, but it doesn't have that Achilles heel, right? That, you know, I have a hard time finding anybody in the market that says, I love the 846 except for this thing here, right? So by continuing to celebrate its success in the market, by adding these new colors and adding that 4 sound signature without taking anything away, we feel like we're just celebrating the success that in the market had from a performance quality standpoint and just making people happy standpoint. So yeah, sorry to ramble there, but quality is something that cannot be overlooked. We are just very stringent about that.
No, I mean, it sounds incredibly hard, and maybe that speaks to why they've been in the market for so long. But what's the warranty? What can consumers expect that they're going to last 10, 20 years? Or
we put a warranty on the products of 2 years.
Okay.
And that goes for any of our listening products. if something is going to go wrong with the quality of the product or the build of the product or the design of the product, it's going to happen within 2 years. You know what I mean? If you're using this product, if something goes, if you drove over it with your car, perhaps not, right? But we feel that a 2-year warranty gives the consumer confidence enough to say, this thing is built properly. If I use it for 2 years, I haven't seen a failure after 2 years, right? It's not, but we also can't say, it's warranted forever, because it is business and they're incredibly, they're not cheap to make or to repair or to replace. So, but yeah, the 2-year warranty is what we offer.
And William, you've had your original model for 8 years, I think. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry
about that. Yeah, somewhere around 8 years. And I would point out that in that time, I've replaced plenty of tips, and I've replaced a cable at one point. And all of those are basically consumables. We expect to do that, but the inners themselves are soldering on beautifully and no problems whatsoever.
Great.
So
what are the cables that come with it? Sorry, we didn't touch on the cables. Anything else in the box that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, we did mention what we said, kind of 22 tips, I think Steve mentioned. Like I said, it's a ridiculously large number of choices for that. The cable is a single MMCX to 3.5 millimeter single ended. Because it's MMCX, it's easily changeable for whatever else. So if somebody wants to do balanced, it's easy to switch out, but Shure has always just stuck with the standard 3.5 millimeter single ended as far as the cable goes. But again, to their point, they're designed for on stage and they're basically bulletproof. So you have to work to break them. And the fact that I had to replace mine was my own fault. So.
Right. Maybe to get a little nerdy and technical, William, did you try them out with any higher end headphone amps that you really liked, or anything catch your attention yet?
Yeah, I've had a couple of high end ones around here. One that I'm going to let remain nameless, just simply because another one of our partners will not like me if I name it. Has done beautifully. It'll come out here, I believe it's mid-October, early November, from Astel and Kern. So we'll say that much and leave it there. I've had it paired with the Sony WM1A, as well as with a FiO M17. Both have done beautifully as far as a portable setup. At home, it's perfectly happy with basically anything I've thrown at it. Most of the time, I've got it plugged into an ADI2. That's the RME DAC amp. And yeah, it seems to be equally at home with both the portables and pretty much anything that I've got. Not as much in love with the tube amps. Balanced armatures typically, that's not where they excel, and most of them are more potent than they need for the 846. So you do have to do a little bit of pairing work with it. But yeah, there's a wide range of things it works well with.
And Sean and Steve, I'm curious, when you're testing them, what is your test rig like? What does that look like? Like, what are you using as like a reference setup to like get the maximum output?
Well,
from them?
The answer there is that there is no one setup, because we have to reflect all the different ways that you're going to use it. So we run it out of the best amps and some of the most terrible cheap consumer amps you can get, to make sure that they're going to translate in all these different scenarios. So obviously for our critical listening, we use really high end stuff. So we make an amplifier called the SHA900. Which is kind of our universal thing for a couple of reasons. One, because it has a really good digital to analog converter in it, and it runs at extremely low impedance, so it doesn't color the sound at all. And so that's kind of our standard, because then we can also, our engineers have those, we each have one, so we're all using the same kind of baseline. And if we do want to propose any changes, that has a built-in equalizer, so we can actually exchange exact parameters and be able to dial in and listen to each other's EQ curves, and know that we're listening to something clean. I also use, like in my studio here, I have this I don't know if you can see it. I use a this little Rupert Neve Designs headphone amp, which I really like. We use like the Chord Mojo, and then a bunch of other just like hi-fi amps that we have around the office, just to make sure that they're sounding, you know, any of those amps and an 846, you're going to expect it's going to sound good. So that's more of a question of how consistent it's going to sound across those. But then, you know, you also have to plug it into your dongle, into your phone, and make sure that that tiny little amp can drive it. And we turn it all the way up. And everyone's always horrified how loud Sean listens to in the office, because they can hear him from a mile away. But that's part of our job of putting them through the paces, making sure that they don't start to break up or, you know, have an amplifier start to go. So, and then there's also testing on like Bluetooth stuff too, to make sure things don't. Obviously, Bluetooth is limited in its own right, but you know, we were talking earlier about the fact that, you know, Williams had his 846 since what, 2014. A lot of people have had these, you know, going on a decade, and they're still kicking. So there's things like, you know, the cables and the sleeves. You can think of that as like getting an oil change or going to the dentist or whatever, to kind of maintain those things.
Go get your teeth replaced.
I was thinking cleaned, not replaced, but
Fair enough.
I guess I didn't put a whole lot of thought into that. But then with Bluetooth stuff, you know, the technology in the 846, it doesn't change. You know, it's still cutting edge. It's still going to sound as good today as it did 10 years ago. But other technologies are changing way faster. And Sean was saying how we put these things through rigorous quality testing. So if somebody has these in theory for 20 years, you know, what is Bluetooth going to look like in another 10 years? You know, we know there's a lot of cutting edge stuff happening on that front. So part of the advantage of having the detachable MMCX connectors is that we can keep updating our wireless adapters. And so you can spend, you know, $100 here and there, but whereas, you know, a lot of integrated, you know, true wireless earphones or earbuds, or what, I know we talked about the nomenclature earlier. But, you know, eventually the battery is going to die in those things. But the earphone's going to keep chugging. So the idea with, you know, the modular adapters is that as we get higher resolution wireless, you know, codecs and Bluetooth, you can keep replacing those things, and the 846 will keep working.
Well, it definitely sounds like the SE846 Gen 2. It's a modular earphone that you can adapt and change the filters. Sounds like this new red filter, if I'm saying that correctly, is kind of the highlight of this new product that you kind of have to hear. You can make them wireless with an extra, depending on how you buy it, $100 to $149, makes them Bluetooth compatible. And the other thing I wanted to kind of touch on briefly is the SE846 is the top of the SE line, but there are some other models that are less expensive. Would you have any, would you suggest people try those lower models out first, or how do you get people to jump to this new product?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We have an entire line, as you mentioned, from $100 all the way up through the $1,000 SE846, all with differing technology inside of them, whether it's a driver configuration or a driver type. Starting at the top at the SE846 is probably a bold move for a lot of people to go drop $900 on an earphone before they're really familiar with the industry or earphones in general. So we don't typically see somebody dive in right with their first experience to be an 846. On the converse end, on the other end, on the entry level end, we've got the SE215, which is you know, been around technically even longer than the SE846, and it is still to this day one of the most popular earphones in the market. It's at $99. It is a workhorse, and it is a nice, well-balanced single dynamic driver earphone with an MMCX connector, so you can still replace that cable. The nozzle is not stainless steel. The nozzle is not replaceable, but for $100, you can't beat it in the market. As we step up from there, we go to a dual driver. Actually, we've got a single balanced armature driver called the Aonic 3 that is a nice, very small, compact, because a balanced armature driver can be so condensed or so small that we made a very small earphone that fits some smaller ears, and it sounds very great, very natural. We go up there from the technology increases to a dual driver Ionic 4, which is a hybrid driver. So you've got the big kind of balanced warm low end from the dynamic driver covering the low frequencies, balanced with this high frequency, or coupled with this high frequency driver that's a balanced armature that really provides some great detail. And that is the first time that we've done a hybrid driver. They're not easy to combine those two driver styles and get a consistent result across different volume levels and different power levels. But we found a way to make them mesh very well. Very proud of that Ionic 4 as well. We've got the Ionic 5, which is taking the technology of what is the SE535 that's been around for many years, and that is a triple driver balanced armature earphone. We got two low frequency drivers coupled with one high frequency balanced armature driver. That one was the top of the line for many years before 846 was available, and it was great, and the market loved it for many years. Still does. It's still out there. The Ionic 5 took that driver assembly, that internal engine, and added that changeable nozzles that the SE846 has. So we're able to take some of that new higher end technology, and as we saw the success of that, being able to bring some of the down market into the $500 product. So the SE535 is there, and that's a fantastic earphone that is customizable as well. So the entire line, it's hard to go find a place that you can try all of them and then choose which one, particularly in the States, and of course online, that's nearly impossible. But a lot of these headphone shows and trade shows and can jams and some local stuff, you can always find that out. And if you're in the Chicago area and you ever decide you want to you need to figure it out, then give Shure a call, and we'll probably be able to find a way to help you out there too as well.
Fantastic. Well, just to clarify a couple things, can all of those models use the wireless adapter?
Very good. All of those models are MMCX detachability earphones. So yes, all the wireless adapter fits with all of our detachable earphones, all the way from the 215 at $99 all the way up through the 846 at $900.
So you can keep that adapter. These are modular headphones. They work interchangeably. All the parts kind of fit together. So that's another it's another way to feel assured that what you're buying is not going to get outdated. Sounds like these Shure products have been around for over 10 years. High quality, lots of consumer demand. I know we're kind of wrapping up here. William, any last thoughts you wanted to add?
Yeah, I had one question regarding, I know when the 846 came out years ago, $900 was a lot of money to spend on an in-ear, and there was some question, about whether you really needed one, things like that. In today's market, $900 is often thought of as sort of a mid-fi price tag. The market has certainly grown in that respect, and there's a lot of top end out there. Has Shure given any thought to doing something in the way of a tour de force, money no object, technology dog and pony show, like what we've seen with something like the Sennheiser Orpheus or the Shangri-La, or those things?
I think about things like that all the time. However, that's kind of a little bit of what we did with the KSE 1500. When we, like you said, when we launched the SE846, $1,000 for an earphone was a brand new thing that we hadn't seen things above $600 before. And the AKG K3003 came out about, 3 months before we launched the SE846, and then the Sennheiser IE800 came out very shortly after that, or IE8. And all of a sudden there was these $3,000 earphones in the market, and it was chomped on. Everybody was cool with that. I believe the 846 stood that test of time better than those others because they had the reasoning behind it, the technology to back it up. And it wasn't just we've come up with a new earphone, and it's really expensive because it's really expensive. And we don't do that. We won't do that at Shure. Anytime that we're going to have some sort of new price point or new entry into a market, particularly at that high level, there needs to be a story and there needs to be a reason behind it, right? That low pass filter and that interchangeable nozzles of the SE846, that was the golden goose to be able to come up with a low pass filter in a passive earphone that would allow for this big true subwoofer performance that you didn't need active circuitry to design. That was the first of its kind. It's patented technology that nobody has ever done before that. Before that, if you wanted an earphone with this big, beautiful bass, you got a bassy earphone that was also had all the low mids and everything cranked up so that you got this result, right? You got no clarity and detail, but we were able to find a way. So that's why we were able to bring that earphone to the market and charge $1,000 for it. And it cost so much that we had no other choice. But KSE 1500, another example where we had this brand new innovative technology, the first electrostatic earphone in the world. And we spent a ton of time and effort to develop it and bring it out there. And that's why when we shipped it, it cost $3,000. Now, if I say we were going to do something like the Orpheus and bring it out at 20 grand for a headphone, that sounds like a wonderful dream that I've had. But unless we have a reason to do it, to showcase some aspect of our technology that really needs to be there, we're not going to just do it to do it. We're not just going to put something out there that's expensive for the sake of inexpensive.
Well, one more thing. You've mentioned the KSE 1500 several times in the course of this. Is there not a KSE 1200 now too? And what's the difference in those two?
So the KSE 1500 was launched. The development of that project was about 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. When we launched it, it is an electrostatic earphone. The level of detail and precision that it reproduces is not. There's no competition, not in the earphone world. And it has an amplifier with a USB DAC built into it. It's got a built-in parametric equalizer. It's got a lot of really cool features. But it took 10 years eight years to develop. By the time we got to market, the trend of new digital technology had surpassed very quickly where we were with the DAC. We had a DAC in there that was $24.96, which is arguably more than anyone would ever need. But at that point, then we're seeing 192 and we're seeing, 384 and all of these new, and we couldn't keep up with that level of evolution in the market by redoing the KSE 1500 every year. However, at the same time, what did happen in the market was people started using these. The players became better. The amount of memory became better. So the resolution became better. So these DAC amps became smaller or built into their players that were good enough. So we took all of the necessary circuitry to drive these electrostatic earphones and put them into an analog amp that just takes a 3.5 millimeter input, stereo input, and then energizes it. And you've got a volume control on it to drive your earphones. So it took all the digital brains and the EQ and the DAC and all that stuff that continues to evolve on the market so fast we couldn't keep up. And we just offered what you need to get that great sound. And that's the KSE 1200. And that is still very expensive. It's still between $1,500 and $2,000, I believe. I haven't checked the exact map price in a very long time, but when it launched, it was $19.99. And it's still one of the best listening experiences you can get. If you want, or if you get a chance, no matter whether you're in the market to buy it or you're just an audiophile that loves really cool things like that, I couldn't recommend it highly enough to at least take an hour and sit and listen to that KSE system. There's nothing like it in the world.
Amazing. So, and you've been able to keep prices stable. Although with inflation, $8.99, what should we expect to keep, or should consumers expect that price to hold at launch? The $8.99 for the SE846 Gen 2?
I pray so. I've seen it with inflation being what it is, and I can see the industry and costs going up on components and things like that at some point in the future. And I'm not saying that future point has been identified, because there certainly hasn't. But at some point, things are going to have to be inflated. I don't foresee that happening with SE846. I believe it'll hold that price for many, many years to come, and unless we have no choice, right? But we, like I said, we don't inflate beyond what is reasonable, what we need to recoup. And unless there's that story for a reason to develop a technology that demands those higher price points, we try to avoid it.
Right. What I find interesting is you don't have the most expensive products on the market. Like, you can find more expensive products out there now.
Definitely.
But you feel like they compete just
Yeah.
as much. I can refer to William. I know he's tested some $2,000 and $3,000 IEMs, right, William? And just maybe, is there any comparison you might add to things that cost a lot more?
I think, yeah, as I say, we have tested a lot of things that cost a lot more money, and arguably there are a few that bring a few more details in than what you're going to get with the 846. And to Sean's point, they've got the KSE for that. So they do have a product in the market that's similar in that space. But there is a big law of diminishing returns as you start moving up through the price tags, as far as the quality improvements that you're seeing. And arguably the 846 sits in that sweet spot where it has accomplished most of what you're going to do, and it hasn't hit that price point yet where you're just adding cost for 0.1% difference. So I think there's also something to be said in that Shure is very quiet in the market compared to a lot of other companies that spend an awful lot of money on advertising, and that it's amazing what you can do when you don't have that advertising budget.
Yeah, for many years we depended so much on being out there and going to different shows and different stores and different communities of earphone, headphone around the world, throughout Asia and the US and Europe, and we would meet with these folks, and we would be able to try different things and hear different ideas, and that was kind of how we loved to spread the word, right? That, and through PR and blogs and things like this, not necessarily buying the side of a bus billboard, or a commercial per se. And that did us really well. We made some great relationships. It's a lot of fun to go build those relationships and share ideas in the market. And COVID kind of really smacked that down for us. So one of the favorite parts of my job was going out to different parts of the world and talking with people about these products. And with the ban on travel for so long, that's kind of diminished those. But I look very hopefully to the future and getting some of that back again soon.
All right, Steve, I'll let you leave us with some closing thoughts on the Shure SE846 Gen 2 that's should be coming out as this podcast is released. You can get them for $8.99. And Steve?
Yeah, I'm just excited after, putting all the time into getting this right and making sure that we, like William said, we didn't want to break anything. We just wanted to add value and make it better. So I'm excited to see these out in the market. We got with the Jade one in particular. I know that the Jade iPhone came out a couple months ago, and so I'm hoping to just be riding the train one day or be on a flight and see somebody with the Jade on Jade and start seeing these in the real world. I also wanted to add just a good the KSE 1500 and KSE 1200. We've been talking about that a little bit, and that's one, Sean and I and other people at Shure have listened to so many different competitive products and so many prototypes that we're sometimes a little bit jaded or a little bit just like immune to having those like, oh my God moments. But I had one probably like 2 years ago. I thought I was listening to a string quartet on the KSE 1500, and I was home alone. And there was a detail in the recording that I had never noticed before, and it was in like somebody either like their chair squeaked or there was a floorboard or something, and I was like sitting facing the wall, and I thought someone was in the room because it was so hyper realistic. And I turned, I was like, ah, and then it turns out I was alone the whole time. So, But anyway, I'm excited to get the 846 out there and start hearing some feedback from the market and continue to work on all these exciting, earphone and headphone stuff that we have in the pipeline.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. We've been listening to Steve Merrick, Shure Senior Product Specialist, Sean Sullivan, Shure Associate Director of Wired Products, and our acoustics headphone editor, senior headphone editor. He left it out of his description on, on YouTube, William Jennings. Thank you all for joining us.